For generations, we have looked at the Great Pyramids of Giza and accepted a very specific, undisputed story. These massive stone structures are the final resting places for ancient kings. We apply that exact same narrative to the surrounding regional structures, like the staggering monuments in Dashur and Mitam, assuming they are simply part of a sprawling, monumental cemetery. This narrative acts as a mask. It is a surface-level facade we have collectively agreed to believe, largely because it prevents us from having to ask basic structural questions. Real royal tombs, like those found in the Valley of the Kings, are covered floor to ceiling in elaborate funerary decorations and vibrant inscriptions. The interiors of the Great Pyramids are entirely barren. The internal corridors of these structures are incredibly steep and barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze through, making a grand royal funerary procession physically impossible. By ignoring these physical contradictions, we settled for the superficial architecture. We accepted the lack of evidence as an anomaly, rather than a prompt to look deeper. To break a deeply ingrained historical conviction, you need a physical anomaly that modern archaeology cannot explain away. You need an impossible void. That anomaly surfaced in Saqqara when archaeologist Zachariah Goneim discovered a tightly sealed sarcophagus. It was perfectly intact, sitting heavily behind 3 unbroken, undisturbed walls. But when Goneim finally opened the pristine seals and pushed back the lid, the interior was completely empty. Subsequent physical studies of the stone indicated these massive granite boxes were never manufactured to hold human remains. Any mummies discovered in the immediate vicinity were relatively recent additions, placed there long after the original construction. With the discovery of the empty box, the traditional burial narrative falls apart. We are left looking at a highly engineered stone shell, waiting to be understood for what it actually is. British engineer Christopher Dunn approached the Great Pyramid by discarding archaeological assumptions entirely. Instead, he applied the modern principles of reverse engineering to the physical layout. Dunn's analysis reveals a massive, active machine operating on physical principles hidden within its very core. The foundation of this machine sits far below the ground. The subterranean chamber anchors the internal architecture. Engineered as a giant hydraulic pump, it drew Nile water to flood the confined space, compress the trapped air, and forcefully discharge. This continuous cycle generated deep, rhythmic 30 Hz acoustic pulses, driving vibrations straight up through the masonry. The darkest, lowest level of the pyramid was never a random basement. It was a finely tuned mechanical engine, powering the processes occurring directly above it. Moving vertically into the middle room, what we call the Queen's Chamber, the architecture shifts from acoustics to chemistry. The physical evidence is embedded in the stone itself. Researchers have identified traces of hydrated zinc and hydrochloric acid alongside heavily corroded copper handles inside the narrow shafts. When those specific materials mix, they produce pure hydrogen gas. Because hydrogen is exceptionally light, it immediately flowed outward and channeled straight up the massive incline of the Grand Gallery. The gas pooled at the very top, inside the king's chamber. This specific room was built from granite, heavily saturated with quartz crystals, and mechanically isolated by 5 distinct relieving chambers above it, so the entire room could freely vibrate. The rising hydrogen gas saturated the quartz. Simultaneously, the 30 Hz acoustic pulses traveling up from the underground hydraulic pump hit the isolated granite room, igniting the crystals through the piezoelectric effect. The resulting reaction triggered a massive release of concentrated electrical energy, firing a highly directed wave straight out of the structure. The precise physical layout reveals a giant stone maser device. The ancient builders utilized fluid dynamics, chemical engineering, and acoustics millennia before modern science recorded them. In the early 20th century, Nikola Tesla successfully demonstrated the ability to broadcast wireless electrical energy over vast distances. The scale of his Wardenclyffe Tower project was massive, yet the underlying physics he utilized were simply a modern echo of the wireless technology established by our ancient ancestors. Evidence of how they applied this wireless power is carved into their reliefs, clearly depicting specialized, large-scale illumination tools like the dendera. This directed energy allowed them to power heavy precision drilling machinery deep underground in the Serapeum catacombs, doing complex industrial work without suffocating in the smoke of open torches. But industrial lighting and subterranean drilling were secondary applications. The immense scale of the Great Pyramid was dedicated to a highly specific biological goal. The persistent electrical output of these structures generated an intense field of static electricity. This specific frequency and energy saturation has a direct impact on organic matter, rejuvenating human cells and delaying the biological aging process. These machines functioned as massive factories for immortality, designed to keep the human body in a state of extended youth for hundreds of years. This ambitious biological project was deployed on a massive scale. The Great Pyramid was one node in a synchronized global energy grid extending far beyond Egypt. We find identical physical principles embedded in the clusters of steep pyramids rising out of the sands of Sudan. We see the exact same geometric mastery in the monumental stepped complexes engineered across Latin America. The highly advanced technological civilization responsible for this planetary network eventually perished, leaving nothing behind but the immense, stripped-down stone shells. When we look at these monuments and see only tombs, we are acting like a future generation staring at a discarded plastic CD case. We see the external casing, entirely unaware of the vast, intricate data it was built to protect.